Hello guys, this is Chess Productions, bringing you the first video on this channel. And I wanted to start with something that was very significant in my chess development. This was a very famous game played by Paul Morphy. I know it's definitely one of my favorites. And it has so many great sacrifices in it, and that's why I love it, because Paul Morphy in the end sacrificed everything for the victory. Spoilers alert. But it is just a great game. So Paul Morphy is playing the white pieces, and he's playing two gentlemen, uh, Count Isouard and the Duke of Brunswick, and they are playing the black pieces. So Paul Morphy, let's just jump right in there. Paul Morphy played e4, a very common move nowadays, and a common response to the e4 is e5. Now Paul Morphy decides he wants to attack that unprotected pawn right away with knight to f3. And the Count and the Duke play something that is not commonly seen these days. It is the Fildor's defense, pawn to d5. So you'll see why that in the end has become a little bit of a weak defense. So Paul Morphy continues to put pressure on this e5 pawn with d4. And I think the Count and the Isouard at this point is starting to get a little bit afraid. So they want to put this knight out of commission straight away. So they, using the bishop to g4, they pin the knight to the queen. So just say if now the knight moves, the queen falls. That is why that pin has taken place. But Paul Morphy goes ahead. He takes the pawn on e5, and before the pawn can recapture, because then queen takes, the king must recapture, and now the king cannot castle, which is bad for development. So before the pawn can take, the bishop must take the knight. And if you're wondering why Paul Morphy captures with the queen, it is because if he captures with the bishop, he will now, let's just say then, knight to c6, bishop out. Of course, I'm just developing moves. And then now he wants to castle on king side. He is at risk of checks. His king might be harassed a lot. And now he has two doubled up pawns, which is bad, just completely bad. You do not want doubled up pawns. So that is why he recaptures. Takes, bishop takes, and he recaptures with the queen. And now this pawn is free to take on e5. And now Paul Morphy realizes that he's on the attack here, so he brings his bishop here on f1 all the way up to c4, attacking. If you've studied chess a little bit, you know that the f7 square is a weakness for black. The king is the only one defending it. So Paul Morphy decides to attack that straight away with bishop to c4, and the Count and the Duke defend by playing knight to f6 to stop the queen from just crashing in there and just taking the checkmate. But Paul Morphy's on the attack here. He wants to stay on the attack. Queen over to b3. Now this is also protecting the bishop, so that if it was going to crash in here on the f7 and check. But of course, the Count and the Duke do not want that, so they protect with queen to e7. So this is protecting this f7 square. And now development. No, sorry, of course, I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. So now, just like the Count and the Duke pinned the knight down to their queen, Paul Morphy's queen. Paul Morphy pins the knight down to this queen now. Of course, that could just be kicked away, but then of course the king side, if the king were to castle kingside, it would be compromised, this long white diagonal that this queen or this bishop could just take control over. So that is why that was not played, and it was tolerated for the moment. And please keep in mind that with this queen on b3, it is also attacking this unprotected pawn on b7. And so that is why the next move c6 was played. So that now the queen is protecting this pawn here on b7. Just keep in mind that the queen is supposed to be attacking. It is not necessarily supposed to be defending pawns. Um, so that is just a little bit of a heads up if you're playing in your game. Try not to protect your pawns with your queen. Try to protect with other things, maybe minor pieces at the start. So now poor Morphy, I guess, just to continue his development, knight to c3. Just getting a little bit more presence in the center here and along this side here. And now the Duke and the Count want to kick away that bishop. It is a little bit annoying along this diagonal. So b5 is played, and this is where the first sacrifice comes in. Paul Morphy is a very, I'm guessing, a very tactical player. He probably maybe took a long time to think about this. I don't know, it was a casual game, so maybe he didn't. But the first sacrifice comes in. Knight takes on b5. So he has sacrificed a knight for 2 pawns. Bishop takes, king check. Knight takes with king check. At the moment, keep in mind that he can't block with this knight because then the queen will fall. Of course, you don't want to block with your queen because, well, queen falls. So really, the only move that he can block here, keep in mind also that he could move the king, but then he cannot castle, and that is just ends up being bad for development. So he has to block with the knight. And now Paul Morphy continues to put pressure on this square here by castling long, castling queenside, and now this rook is just bearing down on this knight, ready to take it, protected by the bishop. So the Duke and the Count must defend. The rook is played to d8, and now Paul Morphy realizes, I mean, he didn't tell me personally, but I think at this point he realized that he was pretty much development, and he was pretty much developed, sorry, and he wanted to get this rook out. Now, normal people would probably just do a rook lift and then get this rook underneath that one. But Paul Morphy, he's a very tactical player, as I like to think of it. He probably is. So he wants to get this rook into play right away. So he sacrifices his rook for the knight. Of course, attacking the queen. The rook must be taken. Rook takes, and now this rook is pinned down to the safety of this king. And now this Paul Morphy's rook slides down to d1. Keep in mind that this rook cannot take because the bishop is attacking the king. So now the queen, it has to start defending some more pieces. And also, I think at this point, the Count and the Duke realized that Paul Morphy's attack was just far too strong. And so they offered up the queen trade here, but it was too late. Paul Morphy figured out the sequence of moves for the checkmate, and it is an excellent checkmate. I really love this. All the sacrifices in the end. White is just down by so much material. So this is the first sacrifice. I guess not really a sacrifice, but bishop takes rook. Now the knight is free to move because the queen is no longer on this square. And then queen just moves up here to b8, check. There's no other way to stop this other than the knight taking on b8, and then the rook just comes all the way up to d8. Checkmate, good game. The king cannot move down to the e7 square. It is being currently attacked by this bishop. It cannot take on the rook because it is being defended by the bishop. There's no way to block it because the rook is right next to it. It is impossible, and it cannot move here to the d7 square because the rook is attacking all these squares right here. And this is known as the Paul Morphy checkmate. It is definitely one of my favorite games, definitely, and that is why I wanted to start off with this on the channel. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any suggestions, maybe something I was thinking of doing, maybe some game analysis like this one, or maybe some opening theories. If any of you want some of that content, I am open to criticism, of course. Any criticism, obviously good criticism. I would enjoy that if you commented. And thank you for watching. This is Chess Productions. Goodbye.